Have you ever tried asking yourself how much you're willing to sacrifice in exchange for a limitless amount of talent in what you do? The price to pay to become the best. Is it hard work? Or maybe genetics? Obsession? Well, there is someone we can ask that question to. A player who was on track to become the next greatest player in the world, but fell short right when he was in front of his target. Mind you, he's still at the top, still one of the best in his league. But one cannot help but ask, if he had less injuries, could he have become the best in the world? If he was lucky enough. Alas, luck is blind, and sometimes you end up on the wrong side. It's no surprise Lionel Messi had this to say about him. He's a great player with a big future. I'm sure he will give people a lot to talk about in the coming years. And he was right. This young man rose through the ranks in Argentina, made a name for himself after joining Palermo, before Juventus came knocking. A couple of years at the top, and he found himself looking for houses in Rome. He's now playing for a club that loves him and genuinely enjoys watching him play. So, come on, let's take a deep dive on Paulo Dybala, or if you prefer, La Joya. Born on the 15th of November 1993 in the Argentine city of Laguna Larga, Dybala has very peculiar origins. His grandfather was actually Polish, while his maternal grandmother came from Italy. Had things gone differently, we could have seen him play either for Poland or Italy, as he was eligible for both. Growing up, his two idols, both Argentine legends, and would show what kind of player he would later go on to become: Juan Manuel Riquelme and Sebastian Veron. The young boy began his first few steps in professional football when he joined the Instituto de Córdoba at 15. During his time here, he would earn himself the first of many nicknames, El Pibe de la Pensión, the boy from the pension, because he had to go live in the club's headquarters after a tragedy struck his family. He would earn his debut on the 13th of August 2011 at just 17 years old, becoming also their youngest goal scorer, beating a record held previously by Mario Kempes, another legend from Argentina. He would break various other records in his time at the club. Most goals scored in consecutive matches with 6, and first player to score 2 hat-tricks in a season. He would feature in 38 games for them, finding the net 17 times. During his time in the team, due to his class and magic on the ball, another nickname would give way, La Joya, the Jewel, with people comparing the young 18-year-old to another Argentine superstar by the name of Lionel Messi. Clubs were starting to take notice of him, believing him to be the next generation of young dynamic midfielders capable of playing well behind a main striker. So on the 20th of July, he would receive the call that he was going to be off to Italy, the first of his many years in the Bel Paese, joining Sicilian side Palermo for a fee close to 10 million. Upon arriving, he quickly silenced all the people comparing him to other players. "I'm Dybala and I just want to be Dybala," he would say, proving that he had the mental fortitude to ignore the critics and play his own game. He debuted on the 2nd of September 2012 in a heavy 3-0 defeat to Lazio at the Olimpico, and would score his first few goals a couple of months later in November against Sampdoria. His first season wouldn't be anything to write home about, as Palermo got relegated with him scoring only 3 times. But in the Serie B, Paulo would show that the year before was just a fluke, getting 11 goal contributions to push the Sicilian club back into Serie A, featuring 30 times for them. At this point, people were still calling him a diamond in the rough. He showed potential but was not capable of calling upon it yet. During his time with Palermo in Serie B, he would train under Gennaro Gattuso, or Il Ringhio, who would slowly build his character and also strengthen his body. Upon returning to Serie A, he had one of his best seasons yet, putting in 13 goals and assisting a further 10 more. This made sure that he showed up on the radar of several big clubs. By this point, he still hadn't been called up by the Argentine senior national team. Not for his fault, as he had quite a bit of competition with Agüero, Messi and Higuain keeping his spot warm. But these performances would earn him his much-awaited debut, coming on in a game against Paraguay in October of 2015. A little earlier that year, La Joya had been in contention between most of the biggest clubs in Europe, but Juventus would be the one to get his signature, the Bianconeri signing him for 32 million plus bonuses. Quite the fee for someone who at the time wasn't even 22 yet. He would inherit the number 21, a legendary number in Turin due to its previous owner, the Italian magician Andrea Pirlo. His debut will come on the 8th of August against Lazio, the same club he debuted against with Palermo, in the Supercoppa Italiana. He would also score in that game. His first league goal will come a bit later that month, as he would get Juve's only consolation in a 2-1 defeat against Roma, the other team from the capital. In his first season at the club, he would score 23 times, assisting 7. A few notable moments would be his brace against Udinese in a 4-0 victory, scoring or assisting in 5 consecutive games, or his brace in the final game of the season against Sampdoria. This would see him winning the title in the Serie A and also the Coppa Italia. During this year, many questions were raised on where Dybala was most suited to play. He didn't have the build and power for a central forward, nor the defensive mentality for an attacking midfielder. He was deployed mostly behind another forward, playing as a shadow striker. The formation in which he could give his best was the 3-5-2, with a chance to overload the midfield so that he didn't have to return on defense, focusing only on the attack. His first season at Juve is debated to be one of his best ever, and in the 2016-17 season, he played a record 48 games, finding the back of the net 19 times, with 9 final passes served to his teammates. Also, at the start of the year following Pogba's departure, Paulo would be offered the number 10, but La Joya politely declined, preferring to create a legacy with his own number. With the arrival of Higuain, this saw him play more behind the lines, switching the formation to a 4-2-3-1, but he still put in some impressive numbers. Juventus would come 1 game short of a historic treble, with an embarrassing defeat to Real Madrid in the Champions League final, but they would win the title and the Coppa Italia. Dybala would get a new contract with Juventus, signing till 2022. He would put in a fantastic display against Barcelona, securing a brace against the Blaugrana. During that year, he would also say, "Obviously, I dream of winning the Champions League, but to become a world champion with Argentina would make me completely crazy." Little did he know how much was going to change in 5 years. The following season, he decided that he had enough of creating his own legacy, picking up the number 10 from Juve. One of the most notable names that wore this shirt before him is Alessandro Del Piero, a Bianconeri legend. This shirt might have been infused with some of Del Piero's magic, as Dybala would put in incredible displays with hat-tricks against Genoa, Sassuolo and Benevento, finishing the year with 26 goals and 7 assists in 46 games, playing in his preferred role, a shadow striker behind the main forward. But the following year, everything was going to change, as Juventus would finalize the transfer of Cristiano Ronaldo to Turin, the Portuguese legend joining after some incredible seasons at Real Madrid. This morphed the team's structure radically, as a more dynamic brand of football focused on balancing out defense and offense was sacrificed, in favor of one revolving completely around one player. Who drew the shortest stick? La Joya, the only real positionless player. As we said before, Paulo profited from playing behind a pure striker. Ronaldo obviously is not that. He can play as a centre forward, but he's more of a winger. So the Argentine was deployed a lot more often down the center as a number 9. In 42 games, he only managed 10 goals and 2 assists, the numbers he made the previous years looking like a dream. At this point, he was being questioned, with a lot of people believing he was going to be sold. This did not happen, and he was ultimately retained by Juventus for the 2019-2020 season. This year, his output got better. He would get back to the stats we were used to seeing from him: 31 involvements in 46 games. Maybe due to the fact that he was more used to playing in that position. He was deployed much more as a forward. His numbers still weren't great when he played in that position, but were better than the years before. In Serie A, he would put in 11 goals and 11 assists, missing out on only 6 games all season. He would finish as the league MVP, bringing Juventus to a record 9th title. But for the 2020 season, disaster would strike, as midway through the campaign, Dybala would suffer an injury to his ligament, keeping him out for 4 months. He scored on his return but managed to play 90 minutes only once for the rest of the season, missing out on Juventus' Champions League games where they crashed out against Porto. He would get a very underwhelming 6 goals and 3 assists in 26 games, his injury mid-year not doing any favors. For the 2021-22 season, Dybala would slowly see injuries starting to stack up. He played 39 games and managed 21 goal involvements. He would get called up for the World Cup, but Lionel Scaloni decided against playing him. He made his debut against Croatia in the semi-finals. Overall, he would only manage 17 minutes the entire tournament. Still enough for him to get a winner's medal as he came on in the final minutes against France, scoring a vital penalty in the shootout. However, at the end of the year, it would be communicated that Paulo was not going to renew his contract, leaving Juventus after some very successful seasons at the club, winning the Serie A 5 times, the Coppa Italia 4 times, and involved in 4 Team of the Seasons. The arrival of Dusan Vlahovic from Fiorentina pretty much confirmed that La Joya was not central to the project anymore. He also wanted a much higher salary than how much Juventus were willing to offer, so he was going to leave the Continassa after 6 seasons at the club. For a few years, he was one of the most prized assets of the Bianconeri. It seemed like he was going to stay at the club his whole career, but the arrival of Ronaldo and Vlahovic pushed him out of the project. His talent and wizardry are still fondly remembered at the Allianz Stadium to this day. In the summer, he became a free agent. 2 clubs were contending his autograph. Inter Milan and Roma both looked very close to signing him. However, the Nerazzurri opted to pull out and resign Lukaku, so it seemed like he was on the way to the capital. A call from Jose Mourinho would seal the deal. Dybala would then start his 3rd adventure in Italy, his first 2 having been very successful, and he would be presented in front of a crowd of adoring fans, with one of the greatest reveals ever, the city in ecstasy over him arriving at the Stadio Olimpico. His salary also came down quite a bit from the original 10 million he was asking. This situation is almost paradoxical. Paulo should have been in his prime years, yet he had very few suitors, with only 3 or 4 clubs really interested. His salary being too high and teams were very dubious on how to fit a player like him into a system. He's not a traditional 10, not a number 9, and most definitely not a midfielder. It's very hard to make things tick. You either build a club around him or you don't play him. Add in his frequent injury problems and we got the reason Dybala was almost left clubless. Most people thought that his prime years have passed. His move to Roma was also heavily criticized, with the media unsure how he would perform under a manager like Mourinho. This would also take a negative turn when the special one would say that he was only at Roma due to his injury record instead of a bigger side. What is sure is that signing La Joya was a very aggressive move for the team, especially considering that even though they had won the Conference League the year before, the new owners were still under heavy scrutiny from the outside media, as they took over just the previous year. This proved that they were willing to splash some serious cash and were invested into their project. Dybala was made the focal point of the Giallorossi's midfield, opposed to his time at Juve where he played in front of several other great midfielders. His arrival to the club coincided with a general dip in form for the rest of the team. Abraham, Pellegrini and Cristante among the many who seemed to have lost their touch. This, however, wouldn't be a problem for him, as he scored 18 and assisted 8 in his first season. But he had several injury problems keeping him out for 3 to 4 games at a time, not allowing him to get into rhythm. He would score in the Europa League final which Roma lost against Sevilla. The Italian giants never really looked the same whenever Paulo would not play, especially offensively, making him the center of the team. If he played, they would play well. If he didn't, they would put out an average brand of football. All of us can see the problem with this. A team so dependent on one player is bound to see negative effects on everybody else. All players want to believe that they are somehow important to the project. But in Rome, a narrative of if Dybala plays we win, if he doesn't we lose was being pushed. The following season, again he would suffer some frequent but minor injury issues. He scored a hat-trick against Torino in February, his first match ball for the Giallorossi, ending the season involved in 26 goals. Roma would again make semi-finals in Europe, but Bayer Leverkusen would prove to be too much to handle for them. Crucially, the deciding game at the Bayer Arena, Dybala watched it from the bench, apparently for technical reasons by new head coach and Roma icon Daniele De Rossi. During this summer, the Argentine would be wrapped up in an intense transfer saga, which saw him on the brink of leaving for Saudi, being offered a maxi contract, miles higher than however much Roma could put on the table. But Paulo, maybe the last of the romantics, right when it seemed everything was done, would pull out, calling everything off and staying in Rome, choosing to at least see out the final year of his contract and maybe entertain renewal talks. After analyzing Dybala's career and what people say about him, I have one thing to emphasize, which I've already repeated plenty in this video. Joya works because he is positionless. He can't play on the wing, lacking the defensive capabilities, and he gives his best as a shadow striker, a very rare breed of player, which almost doesn't exist anymore. He's a playmaker who's very good at scoring, but at the same time, he isn't, lacking the defensive awareness to track back. You could say he's almost a natural false nine. I don't really know how to put it. These days, he rarely plays 90 minutes, but when he's in form, he's still one of the best players in the Serie A, hardworking and brilliant with the ball. His trademark mask celebration has become well known and is constantly repeated. One can debate whether or not at his peak, he was at the foot of greatness. But for me, that debate is meaningless. Paulo Dybala at his absolute best was well into greatness. Had his injuries not been so frequent, he could have become something really special. He's one of those players where stats don't really tell the whole story. One has to watch him play to truly understand somebody like him. His magic on the ball, that sparkle he brings to the game. Unique. Some might even say he is like a jewel. Or better put, a Joya.